Hello, I'm here. And today we're going to take a look at the reading from September 13th. There are houses that creak because they are old, and there are houses that creak because they are alive. And the one that sat at the end of Harrow Lane was the kind that seemed to breathe when the wind blew its windows glinting like eyes. Its roofline bent like a frown, and everyone in town knew it, but no one wanted to admit it aloud, that the house watched. The story begins when Claire and her brother Matthew inherited the property from an uncle they barely remembered, a man who had lived reclusive and died alone inside that crook house. At first it seemed like a stroke of fortune, a free home, spacious rooms, high ceilings, a history stretching back 2 centuries, but the moment they stepped inside, Claire felt it, the weight of attention pressing against her shoulders, the hush of silence that wasn't empty but waiting. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper patterned in flowers that seemed to twist when you looked too long. The wooden floors groaned not under weight, but as if whispering to one another, and the eyes of old portraits seemed to follow from every angle. They laughed it off the way people do when they want to pretend they aren't afraid. And they unpacked their belongings, though Claire noticed immediately that the mirrors in the house always seemed a second behind, her reflection blinking the heartbeat too late, smiling when her lips hadn't moved. At night, the sounds grew stranger. Footsteps pacing the upstairs hall, when both siblings were in bed, doors sighing open and closed, and once as she tried to sleep, Claire heard it clearly, a voice pressed right against her ear, though no one stood there whispering her name with a patience that froze her blood. Matthew dismissed it, saying old houses play tricks, but he too began to change, snapping awake in the middle of the night, swearing. He saw someone standing at the end of his bed, thin and long-limbed, retreating into the dark when he blinked. They decided to explore the attic, hoping to find some clue of their uncle's strange life, but what they discovered was worse. A wall covered in photographs, hundreds of them, black and white at first, then color each one. A candid shot of people who had lived in the house over the years, all caught in private. Moments, sleeping, eating, undressing, angles that could only have been taken by someone standing inside the walls. And in the most recent pictures, grainy and slightly blurred, Claire and Matthew stared back, frozen in moments from the past week, some of which they didn't even remember happening.
They fled the attic in horror, but the house seemed different after that, hungrier.
The doors refusing to open when they tried to leave, the windows showing not the street outside but endless corridors of shadow that bent away into blackness. The voices grew louder, a chorus that shifted from whispers to laughter to screams. And Claire realized the truth as she stumbled through the halls that rearranged themselves with each turn. The house was not just watching, it was keeping them. Matthew disappeared first, gone in the time it took for Claire to blink, one moment running ahead of her, the next only his echoing scream left behind. She called for him, searching room after room, but all she found were more photographs pinned to the walls, each one of Matthew, each one more recent than the last. Until the final image showed him in the same hallway, she stood in, now eyes wide with terror as something behind the lens closed in. Claire dropped the photograph, backing away, but the walls groaned in delight, the house exhaling a sound that was almost a laugh, and the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was her own reflection in the glass of a window, smiling at her with someone else's eyes. People still pass the house on Harrow Lane, and some swear they hear knocking from inside or catch movement in the upper windows. But no one goes in anymore, not after what happened to Claire and Matthew, though sometimes if you stand outside long enough, you will see faces staring back at you, watching, waiting, and if you're not careful, the house will remember you too. This was a fun one to read. Now let's move on to the comments. We have a very good story this week. So let's start off with Bella Lugosi. That was a fun little world you created there. Thank you so much, I appreciate that. I thought this one was a lot of fun to write. You can tell I had a great time with it. I hope you enjoyed it as well, from LJ Foy. This was amazing. I love the writing style. It is definitely different. I'm glad you liked it. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with this one. From Sandra Macaulay, the house is a character in itself. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, I think, one of my favorite things about writing this particular story was getting to really flesh out the house as a character. That's not something you get to do a lot with houses. Usually they're just kind of the setting for where the story happens, but here the house was the main antagonist, so to speak. And it was really fun to bring that to life. From John, great job. This was perfect for a creepypasta. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. That was, honestly, one of my goals with this one was to make it feel like a classic creepypasta. I've been reading creepypastas since the early days of No Sleep, So I wanted this one to feel like it fit right in among those stories. And I'm glad it did for you. From I Love Old, wait, so the house remembers you too, but the house also has a memory of the memories of everyone who has ever lived there? Yep, that was the idea. So the house is kind of like a sponge that absorbs everything that goes on inside of it. So it remembers everything that has ever happened there. It also has a sort of photographic memory, which is why it takes those pictures. It's constantly taking pictures of everyone who lives there. And it's not necessarily malevolent, but it's just curious and it wants to be a part of everything that's going on. And it lures people in because it's just bored. And then it keeps them because it wants to be a part of their lives. From Beyond the Pale, I'm really surprised that nobody has claimed this one yet. There's actually already an author that has claimed this one, so we'll move on to our next question here. From No Name, if the house is alive, does that mean it can die? I don't think so. I think that it's just kind of always been there and it will always be there. I don't think it can die. I don't think anything could kill it, really. I think it's just always existed. I think if anything, maybe if everyone stopped living inside of it and it was completely abandoned, it would probably crumble into dust, but I don't know. Maybe it would just go on forever. From Edmund Custis. What would happen if someone set the house on fire? The house wouldn't mind, actually. I think it would be kind of excited because it would be a lot of commotion and there would be a lot of activity going on and it would be able to absorb all of those emotions. I think it would be kind of like catnip for the house. From Well Done. I am imagining the house as one of those dolls that has the button eyes that pop out. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I think originally it was like a voodoo doll. But it's sort of become this like internet creepypasta doll that has these button eyes and they pop out and they like glitchy and it's really unnerving. If you ever see a picture of it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, imagine that doll, but it's a house. I love that. That is such a great image. Thank you for sharing that with me. And finally, from X Marks the Spot. That was awesome. Well done. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me and I'll see you next time.